hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the career section of my channel again. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate you stopping by and listening to what I have to say. I wanted to shoot a couple of videos, the next step of this kind of progression of the career talk that I wanted to have with everybody. And I wanted to kind of highlight, like I said, the next couple of videos, just the 5 worst things I could think of about this career track, and the 5 best things will be the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about. So to preface today's discussion, the 5 worst things that I could think of, I mean, I honestly did have kind of a hard time like sitting down and really thinking about like what really makes this job, you know, quote unquote, you know, which parts of it are the worst anyways, or what makes it hard, or what makes it unenjoyable, or whatever you want to say. And you know, to preface the discussion today, I just want to say, you know, first of all, I wouldn't trade my career for the world at this point. I mean, I love what I do with an undying passion. I think, you know, most of you out there that are already in this career track would probably agree. And that's just, you know, me and the type of person I am. That, you know, most of the folks that do kind of end up in this line of work, I mean, it kind of grows out of some sort of passion. So take everything that I'm saying today, you know, kind of with a grain of salt. But you know, with that being said, I also want to mention that, you know, this career is not necessarily for everybody. It just plain out is not. You know, this lifestyle is very different. It's very unique, and, you know, quite frankly, some people, no matter what, just would not be happy doing this for, you know, a long-term career. And it's just, like I said, it's not a good fit for everybody. So, you know, part of like why I wanted to shoot this video and talk a little bit about this is because I think people kind of really do need, you know, a sense of full disclosure. If you're really sitting down and seriously considering doing this type of work for a career, you know, yeah, there's some things you need to know about it. And, you know, like I said, there's a lot of information out there that you can go and, you know, talk to your other mentors and your friends. You can find information on the internet all over the place. So of course, you know, do your own research, and everything that I'm going to say here is just, you know, kind of my little, you know, perspective on it and my thoughts and opinions and nothing else. So, but like I said, I just try to, you know, sit down and brainstorm 5 different things I could tell you, or once again, the quote unquote, you know, worst things about this career as a pilot. So starting with number 5, the first thing that I could think of to tell you is the adverse health effects that come about from doing this type of work. Now, obviously, you know, being a pilot, you know, you're constantly on the go. You are a far cry from the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, kind of sit in an office type of person. And there's just a lot of things that come along with that. So, I mean, I could, you know, mention a couple bullet points here that I wanted to talk to you about, and I'll just go through them, you know, one by one really briefly. But, you know, the first thing that comes to mind to me is the diet, and the challenge that comes along with like keeping a healthy diet when you're on the road. I'm not saying it's impossible, but, you know, some things I will tell you is that, you know, finding good healthy foods when you're on the road, you're eating terminals a lot of times, you're kind of forced to eat whatever's on the airplane, or you show up at an overnight, you know, somewhere late and there's like nothing open. You're really kind of struggling to just get, you know, food in your system. Oftentimes it can be a challenge to, you know, eat healthy all the time. So the diet is certainly something that suffers. And there's a lot of folks out there that put a lot of effort, and, you know, I think it's awesome they do that. I've done this for various periods of time in my career. I'm not saying it's something that anybody can't do, but it does, you know, require a lot of extra effort and a lot of extra work. And I don't really think it's like that sustainable of a thing that anybody could keep up for the entirety of their career. And that is like packing every meal that you take on your trips. That is one way to accomplish it, and it's awesome if you can do it, but it's just, it is a big challenge. So, you know, the diet, first of all, is one thing that, you know, inevitably in some way, shape, or form will suffer as a result of doing this job. The next thing I could think to mention is the sleep patterns. Now, of course, you probably assume that, you know, the times that flights go out and depart and land and all this kind of stuff, they are completely all over the place. I mean, the airline schedule is completely, you know, it's up and down, it's nights and days, it's, you know, back and forth and in and out and all this kind of different stuff. And, you know, there really is absolutely no normal in an airline, you know, professional's sleep rhythms, let's say. And it's just something that, you know, some folks will have a very hard time, you know, warming up to this. It kind of wreaks havoc, you know, sometime, or, you know, in some instances you get back from a trip at an oddball hour, you've had like really disrupted sleep patterns for the last couple of days, and you get home and you're trying to integrate back into your home time zone, your normal routine. It's just, it is a challenge. And, you know, a lot of times, unfortunately, you do kind of find yourself really tired, you know, just in general. And there's all sorts of things we can do to mitigate this, but it's definitely a factor that, you know, once again, comparing your lifestyle as a pilot to, you know, that of a 9 to 5 person that has a routine and has a regular schedule where it's easy to keep up with good sleep hygiene. I mean, it is, I will say it's almost nearly impossible to do that, you know, when you're flying around and working these schedules that we work. The next one to mention is the radiation that we receive as pilots. I mean, obviously, you go up in the atmosphere. There's a bit less, protections. Let's say that or, normally human beings walking around on the surface of the Earth kind of enjoy some of these protective things, the Earth's atmosphere, and what have you, kind of lend in the way of protections to you. But you go up in elevation or up to altitude, and you are really exposing yourself to extra doses of radiation. I think there's a lot of medical insights that you can read on this stuff. Whether or not how much it really affects people and how it affects people in different ways and all this kind of stuff. It's certainly a factor. So it's just something to make mention of. One thing that's really interesting, if you're curious about it, I mean, you can go on YouTube and you do like a search, for example, for Geiger counter readings, like on an airliner or something, and you kind of watch the videos of people recording, what they're sensing and detecting, like up in altitude. And it is like a little bit alarming. So it's just of course, like the running joke probably is like everything we do in our present day and age like causes cancer. So who knows, like I said, if there's real true scientific and medical data to back this up about whether it really accelerates cancers or causes ill effects, like realistically in folks that would not have otherwise had them if they didn't do that job. I don't know, but it is certainly something that's talked about. The other one that I want to mention is gastrointestinal problems. Eating different foods and going different places and all this kind of stuff. You're just kind of getting all sorts of different bacteria and things actually like in your system, and it can be a problem. Some people have issues with that on the road. I think the longer you do this, your body kind of acclimates to it and gets used to it, and it's maybe not so much of a problem. The next one to mention is the pressurization cycles that actually happen during the normal course of a flight, where if you think about really when you go up in an airplane, even though the cabin is pressurized, it is still at a 7,000 or 8,000 foot cabin pressure altitude. So that really means, like, for somebody that lives most of their normal life down at sea level, you're compressed by the air to a certain extent. When you go up in altitude, everything expands. I mean, just look at that bag of chips or the Coke can or the water bottle or whatever that you packed along in your flight bag there or whatever. But the human body actually has this, it's susceptible to this kind of expansion and contraction. And once again, I think I'm not really sure that I could point you to any specific like medical examination of this principle in specifically in and of itself, the adverse effects that come about it. But it is certainly a factor, and I think it's something that just, I think the concept is that it puts stress on your body that you would not otherwise experience, if you were doing something else and you weren't constantly going up in altitude and down in altitude and all this kind of stuff and going through these cycles. So just something to make mention of. And the last thing I think of is the level of exposure that you have to germs when you do this job is actually, I think, kind of unique. I mean, if you imagine the hundreds of people that are getting on and off your airplane, and the just everybody is trading germs, bacteria, and there's just all sorts of things circulating around these aircraft and through the cabins, all this kind of stuff, and you're touching different surfaces that other people have touched. I mean, I think for the most part you can try to do what you can do to mitigate these effects when you're flying, and you're kind of hopefully removed for the most part from the main cabin there for most of the time. But it is certainly a factor that, I mean, I think it's undeniable that you're just across the board exposed to more germs than you would be normally subjected to otherwise. So that all kind of wraps up what I wanted to say about the number 5 reason, the health effects. Next thing, number 4 that I could think of is the way that we get paid. And I don't know what management at what point in time of like aviation history like got this one past the labor groups and the work groups, but it is the industry standard, at least here in the United States, that we only get paid our like flight, our real wage, let's say, from the time that you close the door and the brake gets released till the time, all the time you operate the flight, of course, till when you pull into the gate and the brake gets set again. That's what we call this like block time, style of payment, if you will. I mean, that's when we're getting our flight pay. So that nice, like rosy, sweet number that you see when you look at the pay scales and everything, it's a little bit deceiving. I mean, you're not making that, you're not working a 40-hour work week like, most other folks are. Let's say on the average, the average pilot is maybe flying like a 20 to 23 or 24-hour work week, flying time anyways. And this becomes really aggravating and really frustrating. And, don't get me wrong, at the end of the day, you could still make a really handsome living, and, the pay is still very good, but it's the most frustrating thing in the world when, let's say you show up at the airport and, something happens and there's a 4-hour maintenance delay and you're just sitting there, dealing with, the aircraft's problems, and you're dealing with passengers, you're dealing with stressful situations, and you're not getting a dime more than what your per diem pay is paying you, which is only usually like, $1 or $2 an hour, depending on who you work for. You're not getting that flight pay to, like, the pay to be a professional, the pay to, like, exercise your skills and all this kind of stuff. It's just completely, it's not compensated, for those portions of time that you're physically, you are at the airport, you are in uniform, you are doing professional things that your job requires you to do, and you're not exactly getting paid for it. So that is the number 4 thing I can think of. Number 3, the next one, commuting, crash pads, expenses to go to work, and the time that you aren't getting paid to get back and forth to work. I mean, I kind of rolled that all into one. Once again, it doesn't matter like who you are and, what job you're in. At some point in a professional airline person's career, they are probably going to commute for a period of time. And for those of you that don't know, the general concept is, oftentimes, like, you'll get a domicile, when you first start with a company that is somewhere that it's maybe far from where you live right now, or maybe there's a period of time where it takes you to mobilize yourself and get from where you're living at present to, like, getting set up in a new city, in a new town. And so there's this kind of phase, some guys do it their whole careers, and some guys and girls do it for brief periods of time and choose to move to domicile. But there are these periods where, like I said, you're commuting across the country sometimes, which means, you're living in a whole different city and you're flying somewhere else to, like, start and end your trip. So like I said, it's on your own time. You're not getting paid to do that. So there's no compensation. And then a lot of times, because of this kind of, awkward style of life, and you're not going to go and, like, rent like a full-on apartment or, buy a whole nother place in a town that you're only kind of, you're so transient in, and you're only coming in and out of the place, a few times a month maybe, or, whatever. So, people resort to doing things like crash pads, and that, quite literally, if you don't know, I mean, that's basically like, grown working adults, spending or sharing apartments and bunk beds and all this kind of stuff with, anybody, other airline people most of the time, just for the sake of having a cheap place to, sleep, before you start a trip or end a trip, depending on the way the hours fall or whatever, if you can't get home. And like I said, I mean, it's up to you to, like, foot the cost of that crash pad. And of course, like I said, the biggest thing I could say is just the amount of time sacrifice that, if you think about, most normal people, when you get off work, you drive home, hopefully the average person is home within an hour. Once again, with the commuting lifestyle, I mean, you're cutting, like, several, like, literally days out of your personal life. Once you add it up and you kind of do the math, like, at the end of an average month, I think, for most people. So that's definitely a tough part about the job. The number 2 reason I can think of is the cyclical nature of the industry, and things like furloughs and the companies retracting or, like, cutting your wages or doing all sorts of things. I mean, the best way that I could put this, or the way that I explain this to folks that aren't in the industry anyways, and anybody that's been around aviation for a long period of time knows about this whole, like, there's an up cycle and a down cycle, and it has pretty much been without fail since the inception of, since the Wright brothers took off, let's say. But like I said, the analogy that I tell people is that the airline industry anyways is like a lava lamp. And the reason why I say that is because there is constantly companies that are expanding, contracting, rising, sinking, and oftentimes there's little or no predictability to it. Today's top dog is tomorrow's, like, bankrupt, carrier. And, if, of course, like, you don't need to look very far back in history, but I mean, like, ask that Pan Am guy in 1960 or the TWA guy who was, like, riding high on the top of the airline world as far as jobs are concerned, and then at some point in time, like, those companies were bankrupt. I mean, everybody lost their jobs. I mean, they'd gone to other places. Those companies evolved into different things. So I mean, there's certainly this, like, inherent nature that comes about, and it's just kind of an accepted and known thing, I think, for anybody that's a professional pilot in this industry, that just that is a factor, and that is something that it obviously will affect your life and your lifestyle, and everything that happens to you throughout the course of time when you're flying professionally. And, once again, I think that really is a contrast to somebody that goes and, does, like, let's say, like a government job, or let's say that works for Google or Amazon or one of these, like, rock solid places that doesn't necessarily undergo the same business cycles that the airline industry does. And once again, keep in mind that the airline industry it is extremely delicate. I mean, it is highly susceptible to things like changes in costs of energy, or even just like the world economic situation. I mean, there's ebbing and flowing times of like business travel, how much of it is being done, and leisure travel, and hot destinations, today or not so much tomorrow, and just there's just so much goes into it that makes this this airline industry like a real different animal. It's just something you got to know about and accept, and take into account if you're going to do it for a profession for the long term. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is probably one of the hardest ones. I think most folks at some point in time, after doing this job for a little while, are going to deal with, at least to some small extent, if not to a large extent. Everybody has a different life situation, all this kind of stuff, but that is the time away from home and loved ones. And I don't care like who you are, or, how long you've done this job, or where you're at, but I guarantee you talk to anybody, there's been times in their lives where like you've disappointed like your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your wife or your husband, your mommy, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, your son, your daughter, you name it. I mean, you're going to miss some life events. I mean, to some extent you can kind of work your schedule and do as much as you can to kind of be there when you can, but inevitably, I mean, this is a job that takes you away from home for often, days at a time for the most part. And it's just, like I said, it's an inherent, fact of life kind of thing if you're going to fly airplanes for a living. But, it really has a way of testing relationships. And, the thing that's hard for us, I think, as professionals, remember, is that, it's not only hard on us, but of course it's hard on our loved ones. It's hard for, us to, be away so much as we are. And, of course, it takes a special, mixture of people to kind of really be okay with, this lifestyle and being gone. And, there's certainly, I think, a trust, factor that comes along with it to some extent if you're talking about your romantic relationships. But like I said, at some point, in some way, shape, or form, you will probably be tested, with your interpersonal relationships. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you're dating somebody, married to someone, or just have a family or whatever. It is a factor that goes into this. And the lifestyle, like, it really can be like difficult at times. I mean, once again, think about those that have lives, or job setups or whatnot, where you're able to come home every night. I mean, you don't really realize like the things you're able to do every day when you come home every day, that suddenly, like when you're doing this job and you're only home for like 2, 3, 4 days, like on the average, let's say, every week. I mean, you kind of take for granted some of those things, but it really puts things in perspective, and really it kind of makes you value your home time when you are there, is kind of the other end of it. But that's all I can say. And the last thing I want to just leave off on that is like the unfortunate, like the bitter truth is that the divorce rate amongst pilots and flight crews and all this kind of stuff is unfortunately high. And I don't mean to paint like a doom and gloom picture on anything, but a lot of other professions have, a high divorce rate too. I think just in general, the present day and age where we're at, I mean, this is a factor. But like I said, the time away from home, it can be very hard. So I don't think I need to say anything more about that. I think you guys get the picture. But just thought that was the last one I could think of, and probably the biggest one, because the reason why I placed that one as number one is I think most of us would agree at the end of the day, the most important things to us are the relationships that we share with other people in our lives. And, anytime you start like, messing with that or tinkering with that, like it can be a problem. So it's something to make mention of, and just something I want you guys and girls to know about if you're thinking about doing this career. So I know I threw a lot of information at you, and I just want to leave you with this, that at the end of the day, it is still 100%, without a doubt in my mind, it is all worth it at the end of it all. I mean, I love this career. I love this profession. I wouldn't be doing anything else. Personally, like I said in the beginning of the video, and I don't mean to deter you in any way, shape, or form, but I just wanted to kind of shed a little bit of light on some of my thoughts in this matter, and hopefully that helps maybe some of you out there that are trying to base a decision, or maybe, better yet, it helps you just kind of, face some of these things that you're defeating yourself in your mind about head on. And at the end of the day, I just want to tell you that, like, it's really not all that bad as I'm probably making it out to be here. But like I said, full disclosure, I just want you guys to be educated. So Anyways, kind of long-winded. Thank you if you've hung to this point in the video. I really appreciate you watching. If you guys like what you see, like the video, comment down below, subscribe. Please leave me comments. I'm really trying to build this channel and just trying to assist other people that are fired up and excited about this career. And I hope this helped you. So until next time, guys and girls, have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.